Hi, I'm Jeremy and welcome to our farm, Cornucopia Orchards. Just got home from our supplier. We got our next little package, and some of this is stuff that's going to go on the same time as the roof, and some of this is stuff that's going to be, kind of when it makes sense. Let me show you what we got. So, potential future solar install. We're going to run these 1.5-inch raceways up to the attic, and we talked to a solar installer and they suggested 1.5s. And so we're doing that. We have a ton of railroad ties here. We got 20 of those, and those are all going to allow for step downs around the house. And I mean, as you know, we're on a fair bit of a slope, and that will allow us to landscape it. And we probably will do that before we even finish the siding, because then our scaffold can, it would be less of a pain to do the scaffolding. Gutters. So this is almost all of our gutter parts. Connective tissues in here. We did opt for these K-lines instead of a manufactured. Our salesperson who had sold us the metal had discouraged us from buying gutters from the manufacturer of the metal. And later on, I spoke to the manufacturer, and they didn't know like what that person had been talking about. With the experience that we'd had with the salesperson, I just decided to go ahead and get these instead of running a longer continuous one. I can get these to seal just fine. I've done gutters that don't leak before, and we'll already have the lift. So once the metal roofing is on that top, we'll just go ahead and get the gutters on. And if I can get the corner trim to come in, then I can run the top gutters down and have them basically out of the way and done, and we'll be good to go on the upper stuff, and then the lower stuff is easy. So the only thing we don't have, we have the hangers. We're going to do the hidden hanger style that like comes in and then reaches up and grabs that lip and then just screws in through there. The only thing we don't have with this package yet is we hadn't decided on what we were going to do about gutter guards. I definitely, on that top roof for sure, like it's basically, for me, it's a requirement that I don't want to go up there anytime soon in the near future. And so having something that's going to fit in here and protect, a leaf guard, gutter guard, whatever you want to call it, is pretty critical. And then that way, hopefully, genuinely, truly, once the roof is up, I can kind of, wash my hands of having to go up there again. So up planning on the short roof, the siding that's going to go onto this section of roofing. And, basically what I'm working on right now is layout. This is vertical siding up here. And the plans call for part of this to have like a rim board coming that dead ends into the roof slope, kind of like right down here past the window, and then it dead ends into the roof. But we're going to go ahead, and we went with a band board above the window and not below. And that's going to match up with what we chose on the rest of the house. Just made sense to me to have the siding shoot the water straight down all the way, to the plane where it'll just come out onto the metal roofing. So that's what we're going to be going with. Once this wall is done, then I could go ahead and do this metal roof and feel comfortable about it, because back behind me here on the lawn, there's a spot where we should be able to park our lift, and that will let me get to this little bitty roof and this upper section of wall here. That's the plan anyway. But let me show you what I'm looking at with layout and why it's important to really consider what you're going to do before you get started. So this building is essentially 28 wide plus a little bit more than an inch for the sheathing that bumps it out past that dimension. So rough framing was 28 foot wide plus a hair. Now your center is going to be like basically right in here. It's actually slightly off of the depicted marks. This is more accurate right here. So there's our center, just right on that side of that square. And if you take 28 foot wide plus a little bit and you cut it in half, and let's say you wanted it to look as symmetrical as possible, you have two options. So the one way would be to say this is a joint, and so you have a full sheet here and a full sheet coming this way. If we did that, you know, I walked it off and went from there over to the side on the other end, and essentially what you're looking at is, you know, you've got just a tiny space where you're going to be putting in down there on the bottom, where you're going to be putting in a piece of sheathing, because, you know, here's the smart mark out, and I'll talk about that in a second, but essentially you end up with like this little sliver. You know, instead you've got your center and then 8 inches, and then you go 16 plus your spacing all the way down, and you end up right there. And so that, you know, when you get down to that amount, then it makes more sense. You know, you've got like about like that of a strip. It's 11.5 or so, and that looks I think better. You know, it's narrower than the 16, but both ends have the same spacing, and it's not a tiny little strip where you either have to make the decision of putting in a silly, what in my opinion would look silly, a little strip here at the end, or you have to bump out your trim, which I don't want to do, because, you know, it'd be the only place where you wouldn't be at 3.5. And in part that's important, not just because of the way it looks in the end, but because I decided, you know, I kind of rethought how I was putting on, after that first section that I did around the corner over there, how I was putting on the mesh that goes underneath where the siding is going to be on the wall here, to give it, you know, a drainage and airflow plane on these vertical siding boards. It's required. And, you know, I was running them to where it was like, you know, I was thinking, well, if every 6 inches of the edge needs nailed on these 16 on center sheets, then you know, I'll put a strip every 12 inches, and then it shouldn't ever bottom out enough to where it becomes, you know, a problem. Well, that doesn't make any sense. It doesn't. Why am I doing that? You know, your pressure is all going to be right on these joints, right? These points of attachment, you know, trying to think like water. And so I think if I just run the bottom, for sure, that's got to be able to get out at the bottom, and then the sides, I think that will do a great job of giving an adequate plane of air and water pass through. Decided to nickname this thing the Beast. Just checking in because, you know, video after video, this thing just amazes me with its growth potential. So we are now, I mean, this is 8 inches that I got right there. So 8, 16, 24, 32. So we're at almost 3 feet of growth on that. This branch right here is absolutely 36 inches, is what I mean. Look at that. And then just the size of these leaves are so pretty. Very pretty plant. These huge, you know, almost, you know, Gunnera style leaves. And they won't be that way when the tree is full sized. But for now, while they're small, the leaves are huge. Using a golf club?
Yeah. Which is right.
Hey, that's my box full of rings. We're getting into the carousel.
So just a little stretch of inclement weather we've had the past couple of days. It's been over one of my, you know, dad day weekends where I'm watching the boys in cases at work, so not a huge deal. I did just go upstairs and check, and even though it poured a couple of times and we have the top line of the roof open, it could be a lot worse as far as how much water got in. I mean, it's essentially channels about that wide, you know, this wide on each side for ventilation at the top peak of the roof. And you know, I'd cut those open so I could use my tie off to be able to go up and down the roof on a rope. when we did this side of the upper roof. So not honestly that huge of a deal as much as I thought it would be. Still very annoying. We had intended to have it closed up by now, but siding issues with the siding owner just not getting here wrong got in the way. We had looked at, you know, painting the siding down and then putting it up, or putting it all up and then painting it. And I think what I've settled on is I'm going to paint all of the bulk, which is the boards, the battens, basically everything that's not a trim piece. I'm going to paint all of that down. That's the majority of the work. And then some of the trim I may paint down, but the majority of it I will probably go ahead and put up and then paint up. Might seem kind of backwards, I don't know. But that's kind of what I've settled on, in part because in order to keep moving forward, you know, I've been working on trim, you know, bit by bit, as you've already seen. With potential for rain and me being able to want to get into the house with any equipment I have quickly, I'm going to be using some of the 2x6 that we have that we ended up ordering a lot more than we needed for a couple of reasons. It's my fault. I misordered, essentially is what it is. But I want to make some Sawhorses. So one of the things that we are going to be doing, if we are going to be painting, is I want a spot to be able to have everything up and, you know, do sets. And then that way, you know, I can go through and set up the sprayer and make it, you know, time valuable for my time, to be able to spray a whole bunch of board foot at one time in one batch, so that I'm not wasting a bunch of time cleaning the machine out, setting up, you know, cleaning the machine out over and over again. So Sawhorses. So to build these simple Sawhorses, instead of cutting angles and everything else, because I'm working on gravel, not on concrete, and even if not, it's not like having these things flats can give you that much more, if any more grip, really. All I'm doing is I'm spacing them apart. I cut them to the same length, about 40 inches, and spacing them apart evenly, you know, putting a temporary stand in the middle to hold them, 15 and 15. You know, want this to stick up a little bit. That seems about right, or about fine for me. So I just measured down what a 2x6 would be to 5.5. I took my little level, went across, marked both of the pieces. And so we know we need a scrap piece that's going to be wider than that. So I'm going to say right now what we're looking at is a minimum of 7 inches. I don't see any reason why not to go ahead and cut it at 12. Prep the block. Just 2 deck screws is all I'm bothering to use here. So I'm not really worried about this. The other one looking about right. As long as I leave this slightly loose, like that, then I can drop these in and they will fit nice and tight against this board here. I can additionally screw in through the sides if I so desire. I have enough catch. Just creates a nice shelf tray thing for me here. Now we got to test them, see whether or not they're going to hold up. And I already can tell you right now that they're fairly tippy from side to side, because unlike a real sawhorse, these don't have 4 legs, they have 2. So first thing is, you know, these are essentially working by tension. Any unevenness in the ground, and they will rack back and forth. So you kind of got to walk them up if you're going to try and use them as is, which I don't recommend. But as far as once they're in place, strength goes, I'll stay still here so I don't kill myself. So they'll hold the weight. You know, these will hold weight just fine with this setup. So what I need to do now is I need to be able to brace these things side to side. All right, so here's what we got. Just 1 screw again, so you can move these as needed. And these are just stickers again, you know, delivered along with lumber or whatever else to the job site. And on this end, I've tested it with one going one way and one going another. And at this end, these are obviously set up as a pair. I've tested it with them going the same direction, this is better. If they're in a pair, if they're not in a pair, then you probably need to do a lot more anyway. But if they're in a pair, then that way they oppose each other. I think that that's a lot stronger from what I can tell. Now I'm putting side-to-side movement on this. I'm putting full 200 and something pounds on this. So, and this is a 10-foot rig. I don't think I can reach in from the sides and hit that the whole way. So we'll probably be doing more like 8 feet, because I can reach out and paint for 4. Because they're lengthwise, the sticks are almost entirely 16 foot long. So we wouldn't be using this whole rack, but if I set, 2 or 3 of these up to support the boards, I should be able to go through and spray and put on whatever I want, whatever will fit on these easy. So we've got 3 sets now, and that should be sufficient for me to be able to get a whole bunch painted at one time, and genuinely deserve to use the spray paint gun that we've got. I think this is going to be a huge win for us to be able to get these just knocked out. And I may even start doing the remainder of the trim as pre-paint and then daub the rest of that as well when it's up into position, just from the standpoint of, even if I don't use the sprayer, I can roll it on really fast. There are actually 2 deer here. Can you see the second? So I've been bouncing back and forth today between working on preparations for siding and working on the trailer, try and get that ready for sale. And here's where we're at for the evening on the siding preparations. So here's my final sawhorse setup, and I've got 2x6x10. So if I could reach to the middle, or if I had a helper, we could rack, rack, paint, rack, paint, rack, paint, rack, paint, and then possibly put one even on the end here and get 5 on at a time of these 2-foot fascias, and a lot of anything other than those 2-footers, soffits. And then we could get the little soffit and all of these right here, and those right there are also white trim board. Everything else there, with the exception of a few more band boards right through that part right there, but everything else on there, and these cuts on the top, who knows what they'll be, probably more trim, is all going to be the other color. So you've got your trim, and then you've got all of the rest of it as your other color. I'd like to get all this all the trim painted, all the white painted. One of the things that drew me to LP was, the expert finish, and the fact that if you had the expert finish paint colors, you could buy these daubs, and basically it's paint in a little bottle, and it comes down into an applicator tip, and you unscrew the cap whenever there's nails that need, painted over, and then just daub some paint on those specific spots. Well, I'm gonna try. I've ordered some daubs online, and I really hope that this works, because that's what we wanted to begin with, and it's going to make this so much easier if we can paint down the rest of this and then put up. So that's what we're going to try for. Obviously, there is at least the caulk that's going to go on that is going to require, between the corners and anywhere where there's trim, like around a window, and that's going to require painting, because it's not the same color. But other than that, hopefully, that really reduces our workload on this. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more, and we'll see you next time.